that's all we have in common. You spoke a lot about how the crime and a lot of issues in America come with having sex out of wedlock and having basically broken up families. I was wondering your opinion on mass incarceration in this country and how that affects and ties into victimization, specifically related to black and brown people, but I'll get there in a second. America has 25% of the world's prison population with 5% of the world's population. So obviously a lot of your families where kids go wrong, they don't have the support systems. That's why their fathers or their mothers are in prison. And you can look at very concrete examples of ways where the law has not been applied equally to black versus white people. So one example of that is in 1986, the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, where they punished crack cocaine, which black people used more than white people, at a 100-to-1 rate, which was recently reduced to 18-to-1 under Barack Obama. So I don't see how you can claim that everyone is treating equally and no one is victimized on a systemic level when you have laws that punish one race that is more likely to use one type of drug more than another race, when it's actually been shown that among kids our age, white people and suburban kids are more likely to use drugs in schools than black inner city kids.
Okay, so there's a lot there, and you're right, we disagree on everything. So, so to begin with, I don't believe in the concept of mass incarceration because that implies that the police are going into black communities with a lasso, rounding people up and taking them to jail for no reason. I don't think that's happening. Every person who is in jail has had a trial or a plea. The idea that people are just being grabbed and thrown into prison to keep alive some sort of prison industrial complex where the prison masters are the ones running the system, I don't see evidence of that. As far as the 1986 law, I think that it's important to put this into context. And the context is that that law was originally pressed by black legislators from inner cities who were sick of watching crack cocaine destroying their communities. And the reason for the disparity is because crack was more easily distributable and significantly more effective than powder cocaine. It is also the fact that the vast majority of people who are distributing and using crack cocaine were black. You know, it's a drug that the vast majority of people who distribute and use are white? Crystal meth. Guess what the penalty is for 1 ounce of crystal meth versus 1 ounce of crack cocaine? They are identical. They are identical because they are easily distributed and they are distributed in similar forms. So the idea that this was just some sort of attempt to grab black people off the street and throw them in jail for no reason so we could have a permanent underclass of people with no fathers, this seems to me like a giant conspiracy theory with little evidence to support it. As far as the idea that these communities would be better if we just release people onto the streets, so I think it's important, again, to note the statistics here. The fact is the vast majority of people who are in jail for drug crimes are in for distribution, not merely for use. The idea that it's a black kid who's just smoking crack on the street who's getting picked up by the cops and thrown in jail, the justice system doesn't have time for that. Okay, the vast majority of even possessions that are pled down from distributions. Now, I've said earlier, I'm not in favor of the drug war. Okay, but I can tell you something. The people who are currently acting in criminal fashion in the drug war aren't going to be out acting as model citizens as a general rule. A lot of those people are going to be committing other crimes because this has been the history of the United States. When you make a substance illegal, the people who are criminals were criminals before and they're criminals after. Al Capone was not going to turn into a banker after Prohibition ended. And the same thing is true for a lot of the people who are committing criminal acts by distributing illicit substances. So I think that to pretend that the epidemic of single motherhood is going to end, all these guys are just going to decide, you know what, I've decided to marry that girl, I'm going to stay home, and it's going to be like Leave It to Beaver. When they were dealing crack on the corner to 12-year-old kids the day before, I think that's a little bit of a myth.
Yeah, I want to respond to one specific point. You were saying the idea that cops are going into black communities and lassoing up black people is completely ridiculous. How would you explain the amount of black people in jail currently?
Higher numbers of black people committing crimes.
Well, that's not the case.
It is absolutely the case.
It's been statistically shown that white people use drugs just as much as
black. And as I said, people are generally not arrested for using drugs. They're generally arrested for drug distribution in the drug war.
Do white people not distribute drugs?
Well, they don't in terms of proportionality with regard to, I mean, the idea that, again, you need to show me the statistics on drug distribution. So the burden is on you to prove the disparity, not on me to prove the non-disparity. Well, you're the one who's accusing the criminal justice system of wild injustice. Again, I don't have the statistics in front of me, so it's hard for me to cite statistics on that particular aspect of drug distribution, but you'd have to show that there are a bunch of white people who are distributing drugs to the same extent as the black people in jail and then tell me that they're not being treated equally. You can't just suggest that drug use is equal to drug distribution because statistically it's not. Yo.
And if you believe
Yeah, I mean,
fundamentally,
there's a lot of complexity here, but yes.
yeah.
I mean,
So if you, I mean, like if you, but honestly, I mean, these are high stakes questions.
Not to go all religious on you, but leaving aside the religious aspects of the Ten Commandments, I think that would be a pretty good place to start with basic decency. Right? Don't steal. Don't. Right? You know, I'm a deeply religious person. I'm an Orthodox Jew. I don't think that it's mandated that everybody believe in God, obviously, and I think that, you know, and I understand the arguments for atheism. That said, I think that, you know, basic values that we in Western civilization tend to share, things like you don't get to kill people, you don't get to kidnap people. I think that values that have developed later, anti-slavery values, for example, that are a later breaking development from Western civilization, but have roots in Judeo-Christian civilization. Those are values that are fundamental values of decency. The ones embodied in the Constitution seem to me to be good values. Like, I don't get to harm you because I don't get to use the government as a club against you because I disagree with what you say. I don't get to use the government as a club against you because I disagree with your religious practice that doesn't infringe on me. I have sort of a John Stuart Mill view of interpersonal decency when it comes to governmental intervention, and that is I get to wave my fist around as much as I want so long as it doesn't hit your face.
I just wonder about the slipperiness of that, right? Because that same value system has been used to justify a number of things that I think we would understand to be fundamentally unjust.
Well, give me an example. So as I say, the John Stuart Mill system would definitely not value slavery. I mean, that's not me waving my fist around until I hit your face. That's me putting you in chains. I mean, that's a fundamental human evil because I'm violating somebody else's rights. So it's the basic value that originally springs from the notion that we're all created in God's image, and then you know, consummates in the idea that we're all equal under God, and that we all have equal rights under God. That doesn't allow things like slavery, and it